Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Willow had long stood as a beacon of resilience, a quiet warrior shaped by a chaotic childhood and strengthened through the storms of illness, personal loss, and the fragile triumphs of love and family. She had once overcome leukemia, stared down death, and found solace in the role of a mother, a role that anchored her sanity and gave her life a sacred purpose. But all of that shattered the moment the gavel came down in court, echoing a finality that stripped her not just of custody, but of her very identity. The judge's decision to grant Michael full custody of Wiley and Amelia was not merely a legal defeat, it was an emotional amputation. Willow's existence had revolved entirely around the children she fought so hard to live for, and without them, she became unmoored, emotionally severed from the world she once fought tooth and nail to be part of. The courtroom was not just a place of judgment that day, it became the crucible in which her sanity began to fracture. When Sasha stood and, in a trembling voice, revealed that Michael was the father of her unborn child, it sent ripples of shock across the room. But what happened next was seismic. Sasha went into labor, right there, in front of the bench, and Willow, ever the compassionate nurse, rushed to her side. She delivered Daisy in a moment that was supposed to be about empathy and professionalism, but that act, witnessed by Michael, Rick, and the court, was twisted into something else entirely. The child Sasha bore, the one Willow cradled into the world with her own two hands, became a symbol of everything she had just lost. It wasn't long after that Willow collapsed, physically and mentally overwhelmed. She was sedated and transported to the hospital, but even the strongest sedatives could not quiet the howling inside her mind. As doctors observed her, it became increasingly clear that Willow's condition was not transient. She exhibited signs of acute post-traumatic stress layered with deep depressive episodes and possible delusional thinking. The loss of custody didn't just devastate her, it dismantled her sense of self. She stopped responding to visitors, even Nina's carefully chosen words and Drew's awkward attempts to comfort her fell on deaf ears. She no longer trusted anyone. Her mind, battered and raw, turned inward, distorting her memories, reshaping facts into narratives that cast her as the sacrificial lamb betrayed by all. In therapy sessions, she ranted about injustice, about giving everything and receiving nothing. She saw Sasha not as a fellow mother or a friend, but as the thief of her family, the seductress who lured Michael away and bore the child that became the final wedge between them. No one could pinpoint the exact moment when Willow's thoughts turned from grief to vengeance. Perhaps it was during those quiet hours in the hospital, when she sat by the window and watched Sasha cradling Daisy in the courtyard below. To any other observer, it was a tender scene, a new mother doting on her newborn. But to Willow, it was an affront, a grotesque reminder that Sasha had won. And slowly, a new idea took root, curling like a vine through the fractures in her psyche. If Sasha had taken Michael and the children from her, then she would take something equally precious in return. She convinced herself it wasn't malicious, it was justice. A rebalancing of fate. Determined to reclaim control, Willow stopped taking her medication. She feigned progress, smiled in therapy, responded to basic questions with feigned clarity. The doctors, hopeful but cautious, began discussing discharge. She played the part flawlessly, masking the chaos within with a calm exterior that fooled even the seasoned psychiatric staff. They didn't see the rage carefully hidden behind her eyes, the calculation in her movements. She was released under outpatient care, free to return to a world she no longer recognized as safe, nor just. Her first steps out of the hospital weren't toward recovery, they were toward a carefully constructed plan of retaliation. She rented a modest room on the outskirts of Port Charles, far enough to avoid suspicion but close enough to observe. She avoided contact with anyone who knew her, disconnected her phone, and watched from a distance. She monitored Sasha's routine, the morning coffee runs, the afternoon strolls with Daisy, the brief visits to the Courtomain estate. Every moment was logged, analyzed, and stored for later use. Willow's once compassionate gaze had hardened into something unreadable. The woman who had once saved lives now stalked one, believing it to be her only path to salvation. The plan was simple, in her mind. Daisy would not be harmed. Willow would protect her, love her, raise her, just as she had been ready to love Wiley and Amelia. In her delusion, Daisy was not Sasha's child, but the child she was meant to have. The child she had delivered into the world, therefore, in some twisted rationale, the one who rightfully belonged to her. And so, one overcast afternoon, when Sasha momentarily stepped into a coffee shop, leaving Daisy asleep in the back seat of the unlocked car, Willow struck. She moved swiftly, cradling the infant in her arms and vanishing into the crowd with practiced ease. By the time Sasha returned, panic flooding her body, Willow was already gone. The next days were chaos. An Amber Alert spread across the state. Michael activated every private contact he had, and Jason began methodically connecting dots that no one else wanted to see. Carly begged for calm while Nina demanded answers, her own guilt rising from past decisions that might have led to this breakdown. Meanwhile, Willow had retreated to an abandoned cottage near the woods, one that once belonged to Harmony, the woman who had raised her in secrecy and shadows. There, in a home haunted by her earliest traumas, Willow tried to build something new. She bathed Daisy, fed her, whispered lullabies. But those lullabies were soaked in delusion, and the tenderness she offered the child was tainted by the madness that had taken root. She was not hiding a child, she was creating a fantasy. One where she was the mother, where no court could interfere, no Sasha could take what was hers. But Daisy cried often, sensing something was wrong. The bottle feedings were irregular, the environment cold and silent. And outside, the storm of justice closed in. Jason traced her to the property. Police approached cautiously, fearing for the baby's safety. When they broke down the door, they found Willow on the floor, Daisy in her arms, singing softly, eyes glazed, completely detached from reality. She did not resist. She simply wept, rocking back and forth as if no one else existed. As paramedics took Daisy and officers read her rights, she whispered that she had only wanted to be a mother again. That it wasn't kidnapping, it was healing. That no one had understood how much she had lost. She was taken, not to jail, but to a secure psychiatric facility, where doctors began the long, complicated process of untangling a mind that had been cracked in too many places for too long. And while Sasha held Daisy tightly that night, sobbing into the baby's tiny shoulder, Michael stood by a window, wondering if they had all ignored the warning signs too long, if they had all failed Willow. In the end, Willow became both victim and perpetrator, a tragic figure shaped by grief, betrayal, and untreated wounds. Her story was no longer just about loss. It had become a cautionary tale about what happens when sorrow is left unchecked, when hope is taken without offering anything in return. And in the quiet corridors of the hospital where she now resides, Willow speaks to no one but the wind, still humming lullabies to a child who is no longer there. After her release from the hospital, Willow did not return to the familiar spaces of Port Charles that had once offered her comfort. Instead, she vanished into the periphery, quietly renting a modest room at a rundown roadside inn on the outskirts of town. The decision was deliberate. She wanted distance, not only physical, but emotional, from everyone who had once been part of her life. She ignored Nina's calls entirely, letting them ring out before blocking the number. She refused to answer texts from Carly, and when Jason attempted to reach her through the hospital, asking Monica to intervene, she offered no response. To Monica, the woman who had stood by her through cancer treatments and custody battles, she left not even a single note of thanks or farewell. It was as if Willow had vanished not just from their lives, but from the person she had once been. She spent those early days at the motel in silence. The room was small, its decor outdated, the walls stained from time and neglect. Yet to Willow, it offered the anonymity she needed to observe, to plan. Every morning, she would drink cheap motel coffee from a paper cup and scroll through social media updates, quietly watching Sasha's smiling photos with Daisy, Michael's public statements, and the curated illusion of a perfect little family. But her true obsession wasn't in the digital world. Willow took to the streets of Port Charles in disguise, an oversized trench coat, a hooded sweatshirt pulled low over her head, sunglasses that masked her expressionless eyes. She became a shadow haunting the edges of the park, the grocery store, the daycare. Her movements were calculated, her footsteps quiet. This was not the same woman who once brightened children's lives in the pediatric ward or sang lullabies to Wiley while brushing his hair. That Willow had been broken, dismantled piece by betrayal and loss. What remained was something else entirely, fragile, yet cunning, shattered, yet unnervingly composed. For days, she watched Sasha with relentless focus. She mapped her routine like a tactician, what time she dropped Daisy off, how long she lingered at the cafe on Broad Street, the precise moments when she looked away. The stroller, the baby bag, the car seat, every detail was documented in Willow's mind like sacred text. Each morning, she would sit on the motel bed and review her notes, committing every pattern to memory. She was waiting, not out of impulse, but with cold calculation for the right moment. The opportunity came late one afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden shadows across the parking lot of the Java Junction. Sasha had just buckled Daisy into her rear-facing car seat and rushed inside for her regular order, a large latte and a bottle of spring water. It was supposed to be 2 minutes. It was always 2 minutes. That was all Willow needed. She moved like a ghost, silent and fluid. In mere seconds, she was at the car, opening the rear door with practiced ease. Daisy stirred but did not cry. Willow cradled her gently, whispering softly as she closed the door and walked away, disappearing behind the row of parked cars. When Sasha returned, latte in hand, the sight of the empty car seat hit her with all the force of a train. Her scream pierced the air, drawing bystanders, and soon after, police sirens. But Willow was already gone. She carried Daisy through the dense wooded trail behind the town, her heart thudding in rhythm with the infant's slow breathing. The place she had chosen was no accident. An old, abandoned house on the fringe of civilization, once owned by Harmony's cult. It was where Willow's childhood had been shaped, twisted under control, suffocated by lies, but to her, it now held a twisted comfort. It was a place she understood, and more importantly, it was a place where no one would look. There were no neighbors, no streetlights, only creaking floorboards and memories stained into the walls. Willow swept the dust from the smallest bedroom, lay blankets in a corner, and made a makeshift crib from a padded drawer. It was here, in this eerie, forgotten place, that she decided to begin again. She spoke to Daisy in hushed tones, reading her children's books with reverence, holding her for hours, pressing kisses to her forehead as she murmured, "Mommy's here," again and again. To her, it wasn't madness, it was restoration. She had lost Wiley and Amelia, but fate had delivered her a new purpose. She convinced herself this was meant to be, that destiny had made her deliver Daisy into the world so that she could claim her when everything else had been taken. She fed the child formula bought in secret, changed her with gentle precision, and sang lullabies in a voice that trembled on the edge of delusion. Every moment fed the fantasy. Every breath from Daisy reaffirmed the lie she had etched into her soul, that she was this child's mother, and the world outside was the true danger. Meanwhile, Port Charles descended into chaos. The news of Daisy's disappearance sent shockwaves through the community. Sasha, inconsolable, collapsed into Michael's arms, screaming for her baby. Michael, in turn, leveraged every connection he had, from law enforcement to private investigators. Jason took the lead, meticulously combing through surveillance footage, retracing Sasha's steps. It was he who received the first disturbing report. A local worker at Daisy's daycare had seen a woman resembling Willow loitering near the entrance 2 days before the kidnapping. Though they hadn't initially thought much of it, the report now rang with sinister implications. Jason quietly relayed the information to Carly, who brought it to Nina. Desperation outweighed old grudges, and together they reached out to former hospital staff and therapists who had treated Willow. One nurse, hesitant but compelled by urgency, revealed a chilling memory. during a therapy session, Willow had spoken about repairing the emptiness and mentioned that if she couldn't be Wiley and Amelia's mother, she would find a child who needed one. Most had brushed it off as symbolic grief. But now, with Daisy missing, the meaning behind those words struck like ice. The more they dug, the more red flags surfaced: withdrawn medical prescriptions, a motel registered under a pseudonym, and a pharmacy receipt for infant supplies. The pieces began falling into place, and dread settled over them like a storm. Jason knew time was critical, not just for Daisy's physical safety, but for Willow's deteriorating mental state. She wasn't malicious in the traditional sense. She was dangerously unhinged, capable of nurturing and harming in the same breath, driven by a need to rewrite her pain through the life of a child who was never hers. And all the while, Willow continued to whisper to Daisy beneath the moonlight, lost in a world where no judgment could reach her, and where the line between redemption and madness had long since disappeared. The search for Willow took on a new urgency as the weather in Port Charles began to shift. Bitter winds rolled in from the north, and the first hints of frost crept into the air. For Daisy, a fragile newborn still adapting to the world outside the womb, the dropping temperatures were perilous, despite Willow's efforts to keep her warm and fed. Law enforcement officials, working alongside Jason and Michael, tightened the radius of their investigation based on hospital tips and suspicious purchases tied to Willow's alias. After hours of scouring woodland roads and reviewing abandoned property deeds, the Special Response Unit located a long-forgotten house nestled deep in the outskirts, unregistered, unheated, and concealed behind overgrown brush. They arrived just after nightfall, pounding on the door, demanding that Willow come out. But the woman inside no longer recognized the authority of the outside world. In her mind, she was not a fugitive but a mother under siege, defending her child from those who wanted to take her away. When she refused to surrender, the team was forced to breach the front door. Inside, they found Willow huddled in the corner of the dark room, cradling Daisy in trembling arms, rocking back and forth as she whispered feverish prayers to no one in particular. Her eyes were vacant, stripped of recognition, wide with fear and unwavering in their delusion. The child, though unharmed, whimpered softly as the officers gently removed her from Willow's grasp. It was a swift extraction, but not a painless one. The echo of Willow's cries, pleading for them not to take her baby, lingered in the cold air as she was handcuffed and led into the night. In the days that followed, Port Charles was left to grapple with the aftermath, not just of a child's abduction, but of a woman's complete psychological collapse. Willow was immediately transferred to a secure psychiatric facility, where a team of mental health professionals conducted a comprehensive evaluation. The diagnosis was clear: a rare and severe case of delusional misidentification syndrome, specifically a variant known as replacement delusion, in which the sufferer believes they are the rightful parent of a child that is not biologically theirs. In Willow's mind, Daisy was not Sasha's daughter. She was her own, given by fate, meant to fill the gaping void left behind by the loss of Wiley and Amelia. The revelation stunned not only the public but those closest to her. This was the same woman who had once cradled sick children in hospital wings, who had endured a brutal cancer battle with dignity and grace, who had embodied compassion even in the face of unimaginable grief. And yet, in her silence, her pain had deepened into something twisted and dangerous. Daisy was returned safely to Sasha, but the town could not escape the lingering shadow of what had occurred. For many, Willow's descent became a somber emblem of what happens when trauma is left untreated, when the signs of mental unraveling are brushed aside until they manifest as tragedy. Families began speaking in whispers at General Hospital, and mothers clutched their children a little tighter. Willow, once a symbol of survival and hope, had become a cautionary tale etched into the collective memory of Port Charles, a reminder that not all scars are visible, and that every broken heart left unattended carries the weight of a potential storm.